The fantasy hockey world is abuzz, and that's why you're tapped into your daily source, breaking down everything you need to take your team to the top. Miller and Carolina, Canucks making moves, and everything else that you need to know. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, my hockey degenerates? Welcome back inside the lab to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, keeping you up to date on all of the news from around the NHL that's going to impact your ability to build a winning squad. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Steele and I are here Monday through Friday all summer long. We'll be breaking up the schedule a little bit, Steele, now in July and August, but a few days a week at least. We will be here to make sure you got what you need to know. Canucks, Demko, Boeser, Garland. We'll talk about, I think, Demko and Boeser a lot more for obvious reasons. Gibson is now a Detroit Red Wing. What does that mean, Steele? I know you got some takes on that. Mikhail Granlund and Keandre Miller. A lot to get to, and I think, Steele, some of these moves, such as Brock Boeser, there were a lot of teams out there looking to put him in their top six. So I think there'll be some peripheral moves to come now that some teams need some other options. So over to you, Minnesota Wild, one of those clubs perhaps. What do you think about Boeser and this Vancouver Canucks team?
That's what I was going to start with off the top. I'm disappointed Minnesota wasn't all over Brock Boeser. I mean, maybe they were and he just wanted to return to the Canucks organization. But look, he gets a really, really good contract. Brock Boeser, even Thatcher Demko, Connor Garland. This is some really good contracts. I'm pulling them up right now. But Brock Boeser is in Vancouver for the next 7 years, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Next 7 years. And I believe, what was it, $7.5 million?
$7.75 million.
$7.75 million. So good contract. He gets paid.
7.25, my bad.
It is a little bit higher than I was expecting after the season he just had as well. I mean, only 50 points in 75 games, but we're seeing that a lot more with the cap going up dramatically over the next 3 years. The contracts are getting raised as well. So Brock Boeser, 50 points in 75 games, 76 hits, 34 blocks, only 145 shots. Did really significantly dip from the 73 career high points he had last season. But this is what he does. He's been a perennial 50, 55 point player his entire career. I mean, literally go down from when he entered the league, 55 points, 56 points, 45, 49, 46, 55, then the career high of 73, and then back to 50. So this is what we expected him to do. Last year he came out guns blazing with his goal scoring and had 40 goals, which we knew was going to drop once again. He's still a very good fantasy hockey player. Finished 191st on the Yahoo rankings. So again, he's still draftable. I still think, later in the draft is where you want to get him. I mentioned this before when we did the top 5 Vancouver Canucks. I am not a personal fan of what they bring to the table fantasy-wise. Outside of Quinn Hughes, there's not a lot of great options. I talked about Kiefer Sherwood. He was my number 2 guy on this list. I actually think Evander Kane jumps up there as well if he remains healthy. I'm not going to dog on Elias Pettersson anymore. He's just not someone that I would personally seek out to be on my team. I think there's a lot more value elsewhere. But a guy like Brock Boeser still brings it to the table. 25 goals, 25 assists, 50 points. Again, he's still a draftable player, just not personally for me. I'm not taking him anywhere ahead of the 17th round.
So many question marks for this Vancouver Canucks team headed into next season, and they answered some of them here. Brock Boeser coming back. These are all good moves for the Vancouver Canucks. Breaking them down fantasy-wise is a little bit trickier because I think it was pretty clear that Demko, Boeser, and even Connor Garland were all very critical when this team was going to the success of this club. Take this in, though, Steele. Goals for the Vancouver Canucks last year, sitting 23rd in the NHL, 233 goals scored. That's right in the mix of the Flyers, Wild, Blackhawks. Those are not good teams. And I'm not just saying goals for equates you being as good or bad as the teams around you when it comes to Brock Boeser and fantasy value. If this team continues to augment the top six, then I'm going to put a little bit more value and maybe he moves up the board. Because look, 40 goals 2 seasons ago, followed up by 25. I know he missed a few games there. He missed 7 games last season. I'm going to put him right in the realm of being comfortable relying on him for 30 goals, like you said, 55 or so points with some upside. This guy can shoot. So when I see 145 shots on net, that doesn't make any sense to me. This guy's got to fire that biscuit, and then I'm going to put a whole lot more stock into his fantasy value. That is what I think you can rely on him for. However, Thatcher Demko, this is a goalie that I know for you has been very polarizing over the last couple of years and probably for a lot of fantasy cats. Injuries are the narrative here that have been covered at length. Let me hit you with this before I turn it back to you. He's finished in the top 10 in Vezina voting in 2 of the last 4 seasons. He also is only 2 seasons removed from having a .918 save percentage. These are signs to me, Steele, that there is still quite a bit in the tank here. There are signs of him being a very good fantasy option. I love him as your number 2 goaltending option, or if you're really good, perhaps your third. However, these injuries are something that are so unpredictable, and you said staying away from a lot of these Canucks, unless it's a dire situation and I kind of have to get a goaltender, I'm going to be staying away from Thatcher Demko personally, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has a bounce back year if he can stay in that cage.
Look, you already know this as well. I've cut ties with Thatcher Demko. That bridge has been burned for a while. And I swear to God, both twice now when I've drafted him, he has left me out to dry. You know, he's had really good seasons, 915 save percentage, 915 save percentage, a 918 save percentage in the 2023 year. I swear, the 2 seasons where I actually drafted him for my fantasy hockey league, he went out and put a 905 save percentage with a 3.06 goals against average. And then I was like, okay, maybe I won't draft him again. He has some really good seasons. I was like, maybe give him a second chance. No, 901 save percentage with a 3.16 goals against average. So guys like Demko, guys like Binnington, the bridge has been burned. The ties have been cut. There's no longer that relationship. I'm with you personally. I am not seeking and going out of my way to draft these Vancouver Canuck players. That's just how I personally feel about them.
Fair.
Outside of Quinn Hughes and a few other guys that I, in the Banger League categories. So, look, these injuries are very concerning. And what we saw last year with how it played out and how it transpired with this knee injury, the rarity of it as well, the amount of second opinions that he was getting, second, third, fourth opinions that Thatcher Demko was trying to look for. It's concerning. And I understand, he's had rest, he's had rehab, he's hopefully fully healthy going into the season.
Yep.
I don't think this Vancouver Canucks team is going to be good. I don't like the way the blue line looks. I mean, even with Quinn Hughes on the blue line, and I've talked about it before, he's not a great defenseman in boxing out in front of his own crease, in front of the blue paint. He doesn't block shots. He doesn't get physical in those corners. So the blue line, to me, it is very dire. Philip Roenick didn't have a good season last year. You still have Tyler Myers, who is a defensive liability at times. Marcus Pettersson, for the most part, is pretty decent. But Derek Forbort, Elias Niels Pettersson, it's not a sexy blue line. So that worries me about Demko's value. Again, the bridge has already been burned, so I'm not going down that road again. But like you said, maybe he falls in that 0G strategy. Maybe he falls into that second or third goaltender potentially on your fantasy team. But I'm staying away.
I got one more point to make about this Canucks team right after the break. Then let's get to John Gibson in Detroit. Quickly, Mikhail Granlund and Keandre Miller will be here the rest of the week, breaking down all of the rest of the news from around the NHL. And then back to our NHL-wide top 5 targets on every single squad in the league. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Managing your money ever felt easier? That's right. With Monarch Money, it is. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. No need to build anything other than your wealth. Manage your money today with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review.
Please.
We love you. We appreciate you out there. So thank you so much for holding us down through the summer season. Over to you, my friend. Finish it off with your Demko take as well. Let's quickly touch on Garland and his contract as well.
You hit the nail right on the head in terms of that blue line steal. It's not super sexy. And you just highlighted it very nicely. However, what I do want to give some credit to is they were actually pretty good. This is where we got to separate fantasy value and what they were able to actually do on the ice, because that blue line limited opponents to 26.8 shots against per game. That's right in the mix with the Panthers, Knights, Avs, and Kings, along with the Hurricanes, as the least shots against per game. So if that ragtag blue line can continue to do that and give Demko or whoever is in there, Lankinen, the best opportunity to succeed, then the value of those goaltenders might increase a little bit. I'm with you. I'm not going after any of those guys other than Quinn Hughes. It's still risky. This team, I think, is right at a tipping point, Steele, of either going to be right there as a bubble squad, or I could see them being completely trash. I don't want to get hate from Canucks fans. That's just how I feel. Over to you, John Gibson. Much maligned John Gibson, whose name has been in trade rumors for years. Do you think the classic change of scenery here revamps the value? Because he's going to have to battle it out with your boy Cam Talbot in the cage in Detroit. Hit me with your take on John Gibson. Now, finally, no longer an Anaheim Duck.
Yeah, what is this? 10 years in the making, it feels like, that we've
Perhaps.
been waiting to see this happen. And to me, it's just very interesting how it all played out. And finally, Steve Yzerman makes a significant move. We've sort of been waiting for something like this, even though it really... It kind of is difficult to put a pin in to determine what's going on, but he's going to be 32 years old in the next 2 weeks on July 14th. He's still pretty young for the most part. And I know that when we talked about our segments for today, is he the number one guy? Is Cam Talbot the number one guy? I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think, like you just said, it's going to be a battle for that number one position. I think Cam Talbot still brings a ton of fantasy hockey value. Yeah, and I think John Gibson will in this case as well. This is significant to me. I think both Cam Talbot and John Gibson fall, again, perfectly into that 0G strategy of where you want to be drafting these goaltenders. I mean, I know I drafted Cam Talbot very late in a few different of my leagues last season, and I'm going to try to do so again as well. I wouldn't mind a tandem on my team of John Gibson and Cam Talbot. If you know they're going to be going 50-50, why not run with those two guys? Because this Detroit team was only a few points out of the playoffs this year and even the last year as well. Again, if they can continue to kind of maneuver their offensive group and change some things up, they bring Patrick Kane back. They bring in James Van Riemsdyk. These aren't like very significant moves. I'm still waiting for that Steve Yzerman 1-2-3 combo of what we can do with Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, Alistair Brinkett, Maurice Sider on the back end. So I think John Gibson still brings a ton of fantasy hockey value, and I just want to bring up his Yahoo rankings at the end of the season last year. Again, it's a difficult situation to be in when you're with the Anaheim Ducks and how they've kind of slowly developed over the last couple of years. He still finished 230th ranked in the Yahoo fantasy ranking. So maybe he wasn't a draftable goaltender. Maybe you got him in the last round of your league. He was only rostered at 12% at the end of the regular season. So I understand the kind of the put off, the stink face when it comes to John Gibson fantasy wise, but I still think there's value to be had, and I wouldn't mind rocking a tandem of John Gibson and Cam Talbot.
I guess I'm just not as confident in this Red Wings bunch as you are at this point. However, there are some really good fantasy options on this club. And if Lucas Raymond is as good as we expect him to be, I think this player is not getting nearly enough respect. And then when you think about what that might be able to do in terms of other teams having to line up and match up against this club, then this could open up some options for Detroit up front, meaning what I'm trying to spit out, John Gibson and Cam Talbot or whoever's in that cage is going to have a much better club in front of them that can score goals. That's clear. We saw that last year from this team. I know they were good on the power play as well. I wanted to bring that up. The Red Wings had the fourth best power play in the NHL last year, Steele. So scoring goals isn't going to be the problem. I do not think it's that back end. What is the blue line going to be able to do after Moritz Seider? You got Ben Sherratt still, Justin Holl. They brought in Jacob Bernard-Docker. There is some question marks there. I still throw out a couple of question marks around John Gibson, but perhaps it's like you just said. It's because he's been buried in Anaheim. By the by, it's Lukas Dostal 100% go time in Anaheim. You know, I've been talking about that goaltender for a number of seasons now, so that's clearly finally come to fruition as well. An intriguing move. Like you said, Stevie Y has been very active over the last couple of years. Let's see what Gibson can do. Always, we got our eyes on the goaltending market, Steele. Mikhail Granlund, we thought perhaps wanted to very much return to Dallas. We know Dallas wanted him. A 3-year deal for the veteran who put up good numbers last year, Steele. This is a great move for the Ducks, in my opinion, perfectly augmenting all of these young guns on the come up, the Leo Carlsons, Mason McTavishes. We've spoken about this. What's your take on Granlund? I say sneaky good fantasy value on a Ducks team on the come up.
Yeah, these are significant moves, and this team has really changed over the last 2 seasons, especially this last year as well. Especially with the trade sending Trevor Zegras to the Philadelphia Flyers. They kind of, they bring in more veteran experience. They get rid of some unwanted, unstable mental cases right now. And again, I still think Trevor Zegras is a very skilled player, but look at what they've done this season. They've brought in Chris Kreider. They've brought in Mikhail Granlund.
Yep.
They brought in Jacob Trouba last year. Racco Gudas. They just traded John Gibson and got back Peter Mrazek, who can be a very solid backup goaltender. This team is looking a lot different. This top 6 group is actually very intriguing to me now.
Yes.
You've got Cutter Gauthier, who I think is going to be a sleeper goal scorer this season with Leo Carlson and Alex Killorn. And then your second line is Chris Kreider, Mason McTavish, and Mikhail Granlund. That's a pretty good top 6 group right there.
I say very good.
A good variety of different skill sets and facets of what they bring to the game. But a guy like Mikhail Granlund, who's now had 60-plus points 3 out of the last 4 seasons as well, and has done it in the past back from 2016, 2017 when he was with the Minnesota Wild, 69 points, followed that up with 67 points. This guy has been a perennial 55 to 65-point player throughout his entire career.
Yes, sir.
20-plus goals, 40-plus assists. The peripherals don't stack up as you would like them to.
Sure.
He's had career highs of 180, 190 shots on net, but more recently, it's been anywhere between 130 to 150. You would like to see a little bit more blocks, maybe more hits, but that's not his game. That's not his style. But the way he played last year for the Dallas Stars when he was traded there for the San Jose Sharks, as well as the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, he was absolutely stellar. So this is a good move to bring this guy in right now. He gets 3-year deal at $7 million AAV. Good contract for him. And he's gonna go for the next 3 years with the Anaheim Ducks.
I want to touch on the Ducks right after the break. This is a team that I want a piece of this year, Steele. It's finally coming to fruition with all of these good young players. Let's talk about it quickly after the break. Keandre Miller, and we'll be here the rest of the week with all of the news that's impacting your squad.
Yeah, everything you need to know with the free agent frenzy. We're going to get back to our top 5 targets for every single team across the National Hockey League going into next week as well and throughout the summer. Keandre Miller traded from the New York Rangers. That coming up next on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. Flip, over to you, my friend, Keandre Miller. Do you want to wrap up with Mikhail Granlund real quickly, and then we'll get to Miller?
I just want to show some love to what Pat Verbeek. We love going and down the angle of front office execs, giving them the love they deserve. Pat Verbeek deserves 2 stick taps because this lineup is really coming together. And I just wanted to show some love to the back end. They brought in Trouba, obviously fantasy-wise, separate from this conversation for a second. Olin Zellweger, Jackson Lacombe, Pavel Mintyukov. All high draft picks, all really good high ceiling type players that are just kind of coming into their own. We love Lukas Dostal. He's got all the pieces here, Steele. Now he's augmented it with 2 very solid veteran goal scorers who are also, Steele, I would say, especially Mikhail Granlund, just go about their business in silence and perhaps getting away from Trevor Zegras and that kind of noise. This team has not only got the mental side of things fixed, this roster is coming together nicely. So shout out to Patty Verbeek, a very good NHLer in his own right. Now, if you're okay with this, I'm going to throw it out quick time. Keandre Miller is a player that has burned me. I've come on here and I've been wrong about Keandre Miller and his fantasy value. So hit me with your take on, is this the classic case of a change of scenery? Now he's got a major extension under his belt. I had to pull that up because that seemed a little bit high in terms of both term and money. But hit me with your take on Keandre Miller, his value, and this deal. I'm pulling it up, though, because I thought it was pretty hefty. 8-year, $60 million deal. That seems like a really big price for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was. And look, the New York Rangers go out and sign Vladislav Gavrikov for 7 years, $7 million. So they got him for less money on a shorter term deal at 1 less year, rather than paying Keandre Miller, the 7.5 AAV that he's going to be getting now as well. It doesn't make a lot of sense in the sense that Keandre Miller is 5 or 6 years younger than Gavrikov, I believe. So, he's the younger defenseman. I feel like they play similar styles defensively. Offensively, they kind of bring the same touch as well. It didn't make sense in that case for me. Maybe they're just trying to free up that extra cash for their cap space. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm still interested by the New York Rangers. And this is interesting for the Carolina Hurricanes as well. Their blue line has changed very significantly over the last 2 years. They've lost guys like Brett Pesce. They're going to lose guys like they're going to lose guys like Brent Burns. They're going to lose guys like Dmitry Orlov as well. The blue line has changed dramatically for Carolina, but the culture has remained the same. Yes. The system has remained the same. So I think Keandre Miller, this could be a very good season for him. I'm not going to say he's going to jump off the page offensively like he did 2 years ago where he had 43 points. I think he is it's safer to say that he'll be in the 25 to 30, 35 on the high end, but you can expect over 120 blocks. You can expect over 150 hits. You can expect hopefully over 120, 130 shots. That brings his value up in those categorical peripheral leagues. So I still like him, but he definitely falls down with his offensive production. He's not known for that. It's just cherry on top. It's icing on the cake of what he does in the offensive zone. Again, I
Yeah.
think he will finish somewhere around 30 points once again, but this is the Carolina Hurricanes team. That's how they play. They are a stingy defensive team
Yes, they
first,
are.
and they transition that into their offensive group with Seth Jarvis, Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho. So I think he's still a draftable defenseman, but he's probably going to be one of my last defensemen or even my first or second bench player that I go to.
I see this player as, and I guess dark horse isn't right because we've covered him, we've talked about him. The upside is still there, 25, 26 years old. He's still 25 years old headed into this season, triple digits in the periffs on blocks and hits. There's some upside here, Steele, and we know that there was a lot going on in that front office with the Rangers. A lot of players been unhappy there.
Yeah.
A guy who put up 43 points when he was 23 years old 2 seasons ago is when we all started to get excited about a player who can skate, throw his body around, really had all the tools, and perhaps still does, but just has fallen short of fantasy expectations in a big way.
100%.
And now that he has this contract under his belt, and he's with a really good, well-coached, defensively minded club that also led the NHL in shots against per game allowed, there could be some sneaky value here, Steele. I'm buying into Keandre Miller this year. I don't want to get hurt all over again, but I like this move for his fantasy value in terms of the team on the ice. Let's see what he can do, how he fits into the system. This is a team that we've also talked a lot about being right there, knocking on the door, and haven't been able to get over the hump. I don't know if Keandre Miller is exactly the answer, but I would say this bolsters or reinforces a very good blue line in Carolina and a really good team overall.
I think so as well. And it's always funny when teams trade within their division, New York over to Carolina, and maybe this is what gets them over the hump, but that's been their problem the last, 5-6 years is they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they can't get to the Stanley Cup Finals. Hopefully they can do that this year with Rod Brindamore and Keandre Miller in there once again. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out the Locked On NHL Podcast, bringing you news all summer long throughout the offseason. Thank you so much once again. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. For any of your bets this summer, we hope it bangs out. We're doing the same thing with baseball. We're doing the same thing on the PGA. We're loving it out here. Thank you so much, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.